They say midlife crises come quietly, in subtle regrets and unspoken dreams. But for Daniel Harris, 42, the crisis arrived like a storm. His marriage to Laura had become a slow suffocation. A house filled with silence, routines, and unspoken blame. Every night, Daniel sat in his car for 10 minutes before walking inside, just to delay the weight of being seen but not loved. It began innocently. A comment on a photography forum. A message from a girl named Ava, 20 years old, studying art. She said. Her profile was bright, her words even brighter. Daniel replied without thinking. Felt harmless at first, but soon their chats turned nightly. She called him Danny, laughed at his jokes, asked about his dreams. For the first time in years, he felt wanted. You sound so different when you talk to her, Laura said one night. You smile. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't explain that Ava made him feel alive, while Laura made him feel old. Their marriage had been dying long before Ava appeared. Ava was only the spark that lit the remains. Within weeks, Daniel was skipping dinners, deleting messages, hiding his phone like a teenager. The guilt came and went in waves, replaced by something stronger. Hope. Ava spoke of beaches, of starting over, of escaping the noise. In late January, Daniel packed a suitcase. No note, no warning, just a text that read, I can't do this anymore. Laura found it after midnight, the house echoing with her sobs. She tried calling, but the line stayed dead. From that moment, Daniel's life split in two. The man he'd been, and the man he wanted to become. As he drove through the airport parking lot, the rain drummed against the windshield like a warning. He ignored it. His flight to Barbados was already booked. Ava was waiting. The airport CCTV later showed him calm, almost euphoric, checking in alone. He looked like a man heading toward freedom, not disaster. But the truth, as investigators would later uncover, was that Daniel wasn't escaping to something. He was escaping from himself. She said she was 20, Daniel told police months later. I believed her. I needed to believe her. In the days leading to his departure, his messages grew more desperate. I'm leaving her tonight. I'll prove my love to you. Ava's replies were careful, almost rehearsed. Promise you'll never look back, she wrote. Once you choose me, there's no undoing it. At 3:17 a.m., his plane lifted into the dark sky. Below, Laura sat on their kitchen floor, staring at the empty space where his coat used to hang. By the time the sun rose over Barbados, Daniel Harris had convinced himself this was the start of a new life, unaware that the woman he was about to meet would destroy what little life he had left. When Daniel's plane touched down 2 days later, Laura already knew it was over. She'd found the message threads, the heart emojis, the plans, the pet names. The discovery wasn't cinematic. There was no screaming, no shattered glass. Just the quiet, hollow sound of someone realizing they'd been erased. I hope she's worth everything you're throwing away, Laura whispered into the phone that night. Daniel didn't answer. He simply said, Goodbye, Laura, and hung up. Neighbors later told police that Laura had stood outside for hours, cigarette after cigarette, staring at the dark driveway where Daniel's car used to sit. She told one of them, he's chasing a dream, but dreams rot when you drag them into real life. Meanwhile, Daniel was living that dream, or thought he was. In his messages, Ava sent photos of palm trees and blue waves. She teased him for being too serious, told him he'd love the island air. It'll wash away everything old, she said, and Daniel believed her. But before the escape could begin, there had to be a goodbye, and Daniel's came with fire. He returned to the house briefly to collect a few remaining papers, unaware that Laura would be waiting. The confrontation that followed would later be described by investigators as emotionally volatile. You don't even look at me anymore, Laura said, standing in the doorway. Because every time I do, I see what I've wasted, Daniel snapped back. 17 years, Daniel. 17 years. Gone because a stranger called you handsome. She makes me feel alive. You make me feel dead. The words landed like a slap. Laura didn't cry. She just nodded, as if cataloging every insult for future reference. She told him he'd regret this, not out of vengeance, but certainty. "You don't know what she's hiding," she said quietly. "People who lie that easily never stop lying." But Daniel was past reason. He grabbed his papers, slammed the door, and walked out. Witnesses said he didn't even look back. Later, Laura wrote in her journal, something detectives would find months afterward. "He left like the house was burning, and I was the smoke he needed to escape from." Daniel drove straight to the airport hotel that night. The air smelled of jet fuel and rain. He replayed their argument in his mind but felt only relief. Ava's messages came one after another. "Proud of you. You did the right thing. Now we can start our forever." The idea of forever felt intoxicating. For the first time in years, he thought of a life where every morning began with laughter instead of silence. He couldn't wait to see her. The girl with sunlit hair, the one who made him feel 20 again. The final trace of Laura in his life came as a voicemail. Never opened, never deleted. "You think you're running toward love," her voice said softly, "but you're running into a fire you can't see yet." By the next sunrise, Daniel was on his connecting flight to Barbados. He looked out the window at the clouds, convinced he'd finally outrun his past. His wedding ring rested in the seat pocket, a forgotten relic. But fate, investigators would later say, doesn't forgive arrogance. What Daniel saw as freedom was merely the beginning of his undoing, and on that bright island ahead, a woman waited who knew exactly how to play him. When Daniel Harris arrived in Barbados, the world felt reborn. The air was thick with salt and sunlight, the kind that clung to skin and whispered of second chances. He stepped out of the airport clutching his phone. Ava's last message glowed on the screen. "I'll be waiting by the palm trees near the arrivals gate. You'll recognize me." For a moment, he stood still, heart pounding like a man about to meet destiny. Then he saw her, a slim woman in a sundress, hair cascading down her shoulders, waving shyly. Her smile was warm, too warm, like she'd practiced it. Daniel exhaled, relief flooding through him. Ava was real, beautiful, younger than he expected, perhaps 20, maybe 22. Still, something in her eyes gave him pause. Not the sparkle of youth, but the shadow of someone who'd seen too much. "You made it," she said softly. "I was worried you'd change your mind." "Not a chance," Daniel replied, grinning. "I promised you forever, didn't I?" Narrators in crime documentaries often talk about moments like this, when reality begins to twist, but love makes it invisible. Daniel didn't notice how she flinched when he touched her arm, or how she turned her face slightly away from the sun. All he saw was the fantasy he'd destroyed his life for. They took a taxi to the Coral Sands Resort. Ocean view, champagne on arrival, everything Ava had dreamed aloud about. Staff later told investigators they looked happy. But even happiness, they said, can feel rehearsed. That evening, the beach was painted in gold. Ava walked barefoot along the waterline, her laughter floating like music. Daniel followed, feeling 20 again. "You're quiet," she said. "Just thinking," he replied, "about how lucky I am." She smiled faintly. "Luck has a way of turning fast, Danny." The comment slid past him like mist. He didn't ask what she meant. He should have. Inside their suite, the walls smelled of perfume and salt water. Ava unpacked quickly, placing her things neatly, a habit Daniel found oddly mature for someone her age. Her makeup bag, full of old-fashioned brands, caught his eye. So did the folded reading glasses she tried to hide under a towel. "I didn't know you wore glasses," he joked. "Only sometimes," she said too quickly. "Lights hurt my eyes." The night drifted between laughter and silence. Ava spoke about starting over, about finding someone who saw her heart, not her past. Daniel didn't question the phrasing. He was too intoxicated by her presence. Later, as the ocean murmured outside their window, Daniel watched her sleep. Her face looked peaceful but unfamiliar in the half-light. For a fleeting moment he thought she seemed older. But love, as the documentary narrator would later say, has a way of editing what we see. cropping out the truth until it's too late to unsee it. The next morning, Ava suggested they explore the island. Make memories before life catches up. She wore a wide hat, large sunglasses, and long sleeves despite the heat. Daniel teased her for hiding from the sun, but she just smiled. Some things look better in the shade, she whispered. By sunset, they were drinking at the beach bar, her laughter echoing beneath the music. Everything felt perfect. But in the corner of the frame, caught later on CCTV, a hotel clerk glanced at them curiously, murmuring to another employee, "Isn't that Ms. White?" And just like that, the fantasy began to fracture. In the beginning, Daniel thought the island air was healing him. But by the third day, something about Ava didn't quite fit the picture he'd built in his mind. The laughter was still there, light and charming, but now it came with edges, sharp and rehearsed. At breakfast, she wore her sunglasses indoors. When he joked about it, she just said, "Too bright," and stirred her coffee until it went cold. Daniel laughed, but the sound felt forced. "You okay?" he asked. "Of course," she said quickly. "I'm just not used to all this attention." Later that afternoon, a man from the hotel staff greeted Ava in the lobby with a polite nod. "Good afternoon, Ms. White." Ava froze. The name hung in the air like a dropped glass. Daniel blinked, confused. She recovered instantly, smiling as if nothing had happened. "He must have mistaken me for someone else," she said, laughing too loud. But something inside Daniel tightened. Ms. White. The name didn't belong to the girl from the beach photos or the giggling voice that kept him awake at night. It sounded older, real. That evening, as the waves clawed at the shore, Daniel found himself studying her. The way she turned her head slightly away from the light, the faint lines near her mouth that hadn't been visible before, and her perfume, heavy, floral, something his mother used to wear decades ago. Still, he told himself he was overthinking. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the hotel clerk made a mistake. Love requires trust, he reminded himself. But the cracks kept widening. Her stories began to shift. One day, she said she'd studied fine arts in London. The next, she mentioned growing up in Chicago. When Daniel gently pointed it out, she laughed it off. "You listen too much," she teased. "Just enjoy me, Danny." The way she said it, enjoy me, sounded wrong, transactional, like something rehearsed. At night, when she went to shower, Daniel scrolled through her social media again. The posts he remembered, the ones that had made him fall in love, were gone. Deleted. In their place, a single new photo. A close-up of the ocean, captioned, "Starting over means letting go of your old name." A chill crawled through him. Documentary narrators often describe this moment, the quiet point when illusion begins to die. When the mind starts gathering puzzle pieces the heart tried to ignore. Daniel tried to confront her once, gently. "Ava, is there something you haven't told me?" She froze, her hand halfway to her wine glass. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I want to know who I'm really with." "You're with the woman who loves you," she snapped, tears filling her eyes. "Isn't that enough?" He apologized, of course. The guilt hit instantly. She looked so small, so fragile. But as he held her, he noticed the faint powder lines at her hairline, the heavy foundation that cracked near her jaw. When she went to bed, Daniel stood on the balcony staring into the black ocean, his mind replaying the hotel clerk's voice. "Ms. White." In the reflection of the sliding door, he saw her behind him, watching. She smiled softly, but her eyes looked empty. By morning, she was affectionate again, playful even. She booked a snorkeling trip and insisted they make new memories. Daniel agreed, but inside something had shifted. He no longer felt like a man in love. He felt like a man being studied. And by that night, curiosity would push him further, straight into a secret he could never unsee. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The sound of the waves outside their suite felt louder than usual, rhythmic but accusing. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ava's face in the mirror. The makeup, the sunglasses, the name Ms. White. He told himself he wasn't paranoid. Still, curiosity has a way of turning into obsession. Ava had fallen asleep early, exhaustion or avoidance. He couldn't tell which. Her breathing was shallow, almost practiced. The moonlight spilled across the bed, tracing the lines of her arm. Daniel watched her for a long time before slipping quietly out of bed. He told himself it was just to check her phone, maybe confirm that everything made sense. But her phone was locked. Then he saw the purse on the chair, a small leather bag she never let out of sight. He hesitated. Then he opened it. Inside were the usual things: lipstick, perfume, a crumpled boarding pass. But beneath them, tucked inside a side pocket, was a folded envelope. Daniel's pulse quickened as he pulled it out. Inside was a photograph, old, faded, creased at the edges. The woman in the photo was unmistakably Ava, yet not the 20-year-old he thought he knew. Her hair was shorter, darker, her face fuller. Written in blue ink on the corner: Ava White, age 44. Daniel's breath caught. He turned the photo over. On the back, another name had been crossed out: Margaret White. He froze. A rush of disbelief, anger, and shame flooded through him. Couldn't be true. Maybe it was her mother. Maybe it was a joke. But deep down, the truth was undeniable. The girl who'd promised him youth was, in fact, nearly his own age. He stuffed the photo back, careful not to wake her. Then he stepped onto the balcony, gripping the railing until his hands shook. 44, he whispered. She's 44. The ocean below looked endless, merciless. Somewhere behind him, Ava stirred in bed. Documentary narrators often call this the moment of fracture, when love turns to disbelief and disbelief to rage. Daniel wasn't angry at the lie alone. He was angry at himself for needing the lie to feel alive. When Ava awoke later, he was sitting at the small table, staring at nothing. She smiled sleepily. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. His voice was flat. She didn't seem to notice. She poured coffee, humming softly, an old tune he couldn't place. It sounded like something from another decade. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. They went out, pretended everything was normal. But every word she spoke sounded rehearsed, every smile hollow. He couldn't stop seeing that number, 44, stamped across her face like a confession. Back at the resort that evening, Daniel watched her unpack her things again. He noticed her hands. Elegant, yes, but with faint veins beneath the skin. The illusion was cracking everywhere. "Ava," he said suddenly. When was this picture taken?" Her eyes darted toward the purse. For a second, she froze, a heartbeat too long. Then she laughed, but the sound trembled. "What picture?" "The one in your bag." The laughter stopped. "You went through my things? You went through my life," he snapped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ava's lips quivered, her eyes glassy. "Please, Daniel, I was going to tell you, just not like this." "Tell me what?" "That I'm not who you think I am." He stood there, shaking, the room spinning. She reached for him, but he stepped back. Outside, thunder rolled across the sea. A storm was forming in the sky and between them. "You lied to me," he whispered. "About everything." "No," she said through tears. "Only about my age. But I never lied about loving you." He turned away, unable to look at her. The wind howled against the glass doors, rattling them like bones. By the time the storm broke, Daniel was already planning what he'd say, how he'd confront her, how he'd make her explain. He didn't yet know that the next confrontation would end in blood. The storm that began over the sea that night never really ended. It followed them into morning. Heavy clouds pressing low, thunder murmuring like distant warning. Daniel barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photograph again. Ava White, age 44. By dawn, his anger had hardened into something colder. Determination. He needed answers. Ava emerged from the bedroom wrapped in a towel, humming softly, acting as if nothing had happened. Her calmness made his blood boil. "We need to talk," Daniel said. "Can it wait?" she asked, forcing a smile. "No, it can't." The words came out sharper than he intended. She froze, towel tightening around her. "You went through my purse," she said quietly. "Because I had to," he snapped. "Because you've been lying to me since the day we met." The room fell silent except for the ceiling fan. Its slow, steady were slicing through the tension. "Who are you really, Ava?" "I told you," she whispered. "I'm the woman who loves you." "You're 45, Daniel shouted. "You said you were 20. You built your whole life around a lie." Ava's expression cracked. Her shoulders trembled. Then she sat down, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said through sobs. I wanted to feel young again. Wanted someone to see me." The narrator's voice in the documentary would later call this the unraveling. The moment when truth and guilt collide. Daniel didn't respond. He paced across the floor, fists clenching, unclenching. The woman he'd left his wife for, the woman he'd ruined everything to be with, was a stranger. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he said finally. "I left my marriage, my home, my life, for you. You left because you wanted to," Ava said, suddenly fierce. "Don't blame me for the choices you made." Her words hit him like a slap. For the first time, Daniel saw something new in her eyes. Not shame, but defiance. "You think you're the only one who's broken?" she continued. "You wanted someone younger to fix your ego. I gave you that illusion. We both lied." Daniel stared at her, breath heavy. The truth was ugly and she wasn't wrong. But the sting of humiliation was stronger than reason. "So what now?" he said bitterly. "You keep pretending you're 20? Keep lying to me every day?" "No," she said softly. "I was hoping you'd forgive me." "Forgive you?" He laughed, a dry, broken sound. "You stole years from me." Ava rose slowly, eyes red, voice trembling but firm. "I didn't steal anything. I just borrowed your attention while I still could. Men like you never see women like me unless we lie." Her honesty cut deeper than the lie itself. For a brief second, Daniel felt pity. Then anger swallowed it whole. "You disgust me," he said quietly. She flinched, tears spilling again. "Please, Daniel, don't. Just stop. I can't even look at you." He turned toward the balcony, the sky darkening again outside. Rain started to fall, slow, deliberate drops against the glass. Ava stood behind him, voice breaking. "I know you hate me now," she whispered. "But I wasn't pretending about the way I felt. I loved you. I still do." He didn't answer. He couldn't. The documentary narrator's tone would drop low here, noting how silence can be more dangerous than rage. Because in that silence, something inside Daniel shifted. Love had curdled into humiliation, and humiliation into something far darker. Ava touched his shoulder gently, searching his face for mercy. Instead, she saw only emptiness. "I need to be alone," he said flatly. She nodded and retreated to the bedroom. The door clicked shut behind her. Outside, the storm broke again, lightning flashing across the horizon. Daniel stood watching it, jaw clenched, hands shaking. This wasn't the ending he'd imagined when he left home. But in his mind, another thought began to take shape, one that would soon turn fatal. The night after the confrontation, the island air felt heavier. The storm had passed, but inside that villa, another was brewing, quieter, more dangerous. Neighbors later recalled hearing nothing unusual. "Just the waves," one said in the police report. "Maybe a door slam." But behind those pale yellow walls, Daniel's sanity was beginning to unravel. He hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken since morning. Empty bottles gathered on the kitchen counter, the sound of the ceiling fan filling the silence Ava left behind. She stayed locked in the bedroom for hours, her muffled sobs fading into the ocean's hum. The documentary's narrator would later describe this phase as the quiet before collapse, when anger ferments into obsession. Daniel kept replaying her words. "We both lied." He told himself he deserved honesty, that she'd tricked him, humiliated him. But deep down, the real wound was pride. He couldn't bear the thought that he'd been fooled, that everyone back home would eventually find out. As the clock neared midnight, he knocked on the bedroom door. "Ava," he said, voice unsteady. We need to talk. Silence. Please, he added, softer this time. Just come out. The door creaked open a few inches. Ava stood in the dim light, her face pale, eyes swollen. I don't want to fight anymore, she whispered. Neither do I, he replied, though his tone was colder than his words. They sat opposite each other at the small dining table. Between them lay the photograph, the one that started it all. Was anything about us real? He asked. Yes, she said quickly. Everything was real, except my age. That is everything, he muttered. Ava reached out, trembling. Daniel, please. I was scared. I didn't think you'd love me if I told you. Her honesty landed too late. Daniel's jaw clenched. The sound of the storm still echoed in his mind. Waves crashing, thunder rolling. But now it was inside him. He rose from his chair, pacing, hands shaking. You made me a joke, Ava, he said. I left everything for you. Do you understand what that means? It means you chose me, she said softly. And now you regret it. Her calmness only fueled his rage. You used me, he spat. You made me believe in something that didn't exist. No, she said, voice breaking. I loved you, Daniel. Even now. She stood, stepping closer. We can still fix this. But something in his eyes had changed. A glassy emptiness that no plea could reach. It's already broken, he said quietly. The narrator's voice would describe this as the irreversible moment, when emotion detaches from consequence. Ava backed away, sensing the shift. You're scaring me, she whispered. Daniel's breathing grew ragged. He wasn't hearing her anymore. Only the pounding in his head, the shame, the image of his wife's face when she'd learned what he'd done. He grabbed the photograph, crumpling it in his fist. You ruined my life, he said. Daniel, please. Her words were cut short by the sound of something shattering. A glass, a chair leg, maybe his restraint. Neighbors later recalled hearing a thud and something metallic rolling. Then nothing but the sound of rain. When the police arrived hours later, the villa was silent. A lamp lay shattered. The dining chair overturned. Ava White was found near the balcony, lifeless. Daniel sat beside her, blood on his hands, muttering words no one could understand. She lied, he kept saying. She lied to me. The camera would fade to black here, the narrator's voice low and deliberate. In that final moment, Daniel Cross stopped being a victim of deception and became the architect of tragedy. Outside, the ocean roared, endless, indifferent, as dawn broke over the island. And inside that villa, silence finally claimed what anger had begun. The sound of rain tapping against the windows became the only witness to what happened next. The island, asleep under a heavy gray sky, had no idea that inside Villa 12, a life was ending, and another was being destroyed. For the investigators who later reconstructed the scene, the timeline was both chilling and precise. Around 12:47 a.m., Daniel Cross struck Ava White during an argument that had spiraled into chaos. But in that moment, it wasn't just rage. It was desperation, humiliation, and a loss of control years in the making. The documentary's narrator would call it a murder born not from hate, but from the unbearable weight of shame. Daniel didn't remember grabbing the glass figurine from the shelf. He only remembered her voice, trembling, pleading, then suddenly silent. Daniel, please, don't. Crack. The sound echoed through the small villa, sharp as thunder. The figurine fell to the floor, rolling in two jagged pieces. Ava stumbled backward, clutching her neck, eyes wide, disbelief more than pain. Oh my God, he muttered, stepping toward her. Ava, I didn't. But she was already collapsing. The towel she'd used to stop the bleeding slipped from her hand, darkening with red. The next seconds stretched into forever. Daniel knelt beside her, shaking, trying to hold her upright. Stay with me. Please, Ava, don't do this. Her lips moved faintly. I didn't mean to lie. Then silence. Only the rain, steady and cruel. The camera in the reenactment would cut here, zooming out slowly, the image blurring as the narrator's voice takes over. When the storm outside ended, another began inside Daniel Cross's mind. He had killed the only person who still claimed to love him. He sat beside her body for what felt like hours. The walls of the villa seemed to close in, every sound amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the slow dripping of rain through a cracked window. He pressed his palms to his face, whispering to no one, "This isn't real. She's not dead. She can't be." But reality sat in front of him, lifeless and still. At 3:15 a.m., security footage from the resort showed Daniel stepping outside barefoot, shirt soaked in blood. He wandered the pathway toward the beach, moving like a sleepwalker. He stopped near the waterline, staring at the horizon as if waiting for it to swallow him. The tide washed over his feet, erasing footprints before they could form. "I didn't mean it," he whispered. "I didn't mean it." When he returned to the villa, Ava's body was already cold. He covered her with a sheet, placed the broken figurine beside her, like a makeshift apology. Then he sat in the corner, staring into nothing. Investigators later found his fingerprints on the weapon, blood traces on the balcony rail, and a half-written note in his pocket that read, "I just wanted to start over." Neighbors reported hearing muffled sobs in the early morning hours. One said she saw the lights flicker repeatedly on, off, on again. Another mentioned a man's shadow pacing near the glass doors. The documentary replayed these details like puzzle pieces, the narrator's voice low and clinical. In forensic terms, the scene told a simple story: anger, confrontation, impact. But emotionally, it revealed something far more complex: the collapse of a man's identity. By dawn, the island awoke to police sirens, rare, startling in their echo. Officers found the villa unlocked, curtains drawn. Inside, a crime scene frozen in stillness. Ava White lay near the balcony, a thin beam of sunlight touching her face. Daniel sat beside her, dazed, whispering her name again and again. "Ava, Ava, wake up. Please wake up." The first responder, Officer Ruiz, later testified. He wasn't trying to run. He wasn't hiding. He just kept saying, "She lied to me. She lied." The footage cut to black as the narrator's tone dropped. What began as a forbidden romance, a man chasing youth, a woman chasing love, ended in blood and regret. The line between love and destruction had vanished. Daniel was handcuffed at 6:42 a.m., still in shock, still whispering apologies no one could hear. The camera would linger on the villa one last time. The overturned chair, the crumpled photograph, the broken glass figurine glinting in the morning light. The narrator's closing line for the episode said it best. In the end, it wasn't the lie that killed her. It was the truth, the moment Daniel Cross finally saw it. When the sun rose over the island that morning, it cast a deceptive calm across the shoreline. To the world outside, it was another postcard dawn. But inside Villa 12, Daniel Cross was trying to erase the night that had just rewritten his life. The camera pans across the crime scene photos, streaks of blood on the tiles, the broken glass figurine glinting near Ava's body, the sheet he'd pulled over her face. The narrator's voice drops low. In the hours after the killing, Daniel's instincts shifted from grief to survival. At 6:47 a.m., resort surveillance captured him pacing the balcony, muttering, shaking his hands as if trying to fling the guilt away. He hadn't called the police. Not yet. Some part of him believed he could undo it, that he could make it all disappear. He filled a bucket with water, scrubbed at the floor until his knuckles bled. The red smears only spread wider. His breathing quickened. Panic replaced reason. "Think," he whispered. "Just think." He gathered Ava's belongings, her purse, her phone, the makeup bag she always left on the counter, and tossed them into a suitcase. He wiped the doorknobs, the table, even the balcony rail. His every movement was frantic, mechanical. The documentary cuts to a reconstruction shot. Daniel dumping the suitcase into the shallow surf behind the villa. The tide began to pull it away, carrying her things toward open water. The narrator continues. This wasn't a professional cover-up. It was a desperate man's attempt to erase what could never be erased. Inside, he washed his face, changed into clean clothes, and stared at himself in the mirror. His reflection looked foreign, a man hollowed out by shock. "You can fix this," he whispered. "Just tell them it was an accident." But the room betrayed him. Every corner carried evidence. The blood stain beneath the rug, the shattered figurine, the bruises on his arms. He dragged the rug outside, hosed it down, then hid it behind a row of palms. Resort staff later told investigators they saw him there, just standing, watching the sea. For nearly 20 minutes. The documentary switches tone here, slow, tense, clinical. Forensic analyst Maria Ruiz describes the scene later. "It looked like someone tried to clean up, but gave up halfway. There were streaks on the floor, fingerprints smeared instead of wiped. He wanted to hide it, but part of him wanted to be caught. That part of him was growing louder." By mid-morning, Daniel was unraveling again. He found Ava's necklace on the table, the one he'd given her when they arrived. The pendant was cracked, speckled with blood. He sank to his knees, clutching it. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean this." His phone buzzed. A message from the resort manager reminding guests about checkout. The normality of it broke him. He stared at the screen, shaking, then typed a reply that would later baffle investigators. "We're fine. Just leaving soon." The narrator's tone turns chilling. Even in that moment, Daniel couldn't face what he'd done. Denial became its own kind of cover-up. He poured whiskey into a glass, gulped it down, and finally picked up the phone again. Not to call for help, but to call his ex-wife. The voicemail caught only fragments of his voice. "I messed up," she lied. "I didn't mean." Then nothing. By noon, resort housekeeping approached the villa. The door was slightly open, curtains fluttering. Through the gap, they saw him sitting motionless beside Ava's body again, head bowed, hands clasped as if praying. The police arrived minutes later. The cleanup was pointless. The scene told the truth anyway. As the camera zooms out, the narrator delivers the final line of the episode. Daniel Cross thought he could wash away the blood. But in trying to hide his crime, he only made it clearer. The sirens had faded, but their echo still lived in Daniel's head. He sat inside the small, air-conditioned room at the Bridgetown Police Department, wrists cuffed, shirt still stiff with dried blood. Outside, the Caribbean sun burned bright, indifferent to what was unfolding inside. The camera pans across the interrogation room. White walls, a single table, a buzzing fluorescent light overhead. The narrator's voice enters, calm yet haunting. For investigators, it wasn't a question of if Daniel killed Ava White. It was a question of why. Detective Alana Greaves entered the room, folder in hand. She was measured, patient, the kind of interrogator who let silence do the talking. She sat down across from him, flipping through photos of the crime scene. "You understand why you're here, Mr. Cross?" she asked. "She's dead," he said softly. "I didn't mean for that to happen." His voice trembled, flat. Not the voice of a killer, but of a man still trying to convince himself he wasn't one. "Tell me what happened," she said. He hesitated, glancing at the one-way mirror. Somewhere behind it, cameras were rolling. His reflection stared back, pale, hollow, exhausted. "We argued," he whispered. "She lied to me about everything. Her age, her life. I lost control." Detective Greaves slid a photo across the table. Ava's body, covered with the sheet. "Losing control doesn't usually end with this," she said. He closed his eyes, pressing his hands together as if in prayer. "I tried to stop the bleeding. I swear I did. But she stopped breathing." She leaned in, voice steady. "Then why didn't you call for help?" Daniel's jaw tightened. His breathing quickened. "I don't know," he said. "I thought maybe I could fix it. I panicked." The documentary narrator cuts in. Every confession tells two stories, one to the police and one to the conscience. Daniel Cross was still deciding which one to believe. Detective Greaves placed the broken glass figurine on the table, sealed in an evidence bag. "This is what you hit her with," she said. "It was an accident," he replied, voice cracking. "I didn't even realize I was holding it." She didn't respond right away. The silence pressed down on him like weight. "Do you love her?" she asked finally. He blinked, caught off guard. "I thought I did," he whispered. "But I think I loved what she made me feel. Young, wanted, alive. And when that illusion broke," she said, "you killed her." "No," he said sharply. "No, it wasn't like that. I just snapped." The word snapped hung in the air, a word the prosecution would later repeat again and again in court. Detective Greaves gathered her papers, closing the file. "You covered it up, Mr. Cross. You cleaned the blood, hid her belongings, lied to the resort staff. That's not panic. That's guilt." He looked up at her, eyes rimmed red. "What was I supposed to do? Tell them I killed the woman I left my wife for? You don't understand. Everyone would have laughed at me." The narrator's voice returns, low and deliberate. To Daniel, humiliation was worse than prison. In his mind, the real crime wasn't murder. It was being deceived. Greaves rose from her chair. "We'll let the court decide what this was," she said. "For now, you're under arrest for the murder of Ava White." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You could have just walked away, Daniel. You didn't have to kill her." He didn't answer. He stared at the floor, whispering to himself, "She lied." The camera lingers on his face, hollow, drained, almost childlike. The narrator delivers the closing words. The interrogation was over, but the story wasn't. Next came the courtroom, where truth, guilt, and obsession would all stand trial. The camera opens on the gray walls of the Barbados Central Jail. Chipped paint, flickering lights, a heavy door that slams shut with a sound that stays in your bones. Daniel Cross was no longer the man who once strolled barefoot on a beach beside the woman he thought was 20. He was inmate number 4312, sitting in a cell that smelled of bleach and regret. The narrator's voice fades in, calm but piercing. For most killers, confession brings a strange kind of peace. But for Daniel, it brought only the crushing weight of what he'd destroyed. He spent the first week in near silence. No visitors, no phone calls. Just the echo of Ava's voice replaying in his head. "I didn't mean to lie." It became a haunting refrain, looping endlessly until he could barely sleep. When the guards brought food, he barely touched it. When psychologists tried to talk, he stared through them. Guilt had hollowed him out, but not in the way people expected. "She lied," he muttered one night to himself. "But I killed her." In the reenactment scene, the camera lingers on him sitting in the dark, light from the barred window casting thin lines across his face. His hands tremble, but his eyes remain fixed, distant, almost empty. The documentary cuts to an interview with Dr. Lena Morales, the prison psychiatrist. "He oscillated between denial and remorse," she says. "Some days he wept uncontrollably. Other days he convinced himself he was the victim, that she pushed him to it. It's the classic cycle of guilt and justification." When she asked him why he didn't just walk away, Daniel gave the same answer every time. "Because she made me believe again," he said. "And when I found out it was all fake, something inside me broke." Dr. Morales's voice overlaps with a slow zoom in of Daniel's eyes. "That's not love," she says. "That's possession." Weeks passed. His case became tabloid gold. Headlines screamed, "American businessman kills older woman after age deception." Every article painted him differently, some as a monster, others as a man deceived beyond reason. But inside that jail cell, none of it mattered. Daniel's ex-wife, Clara, finally visited after a month. The documentary dramatizes the moment. The sound of the metal door sliding open, her cautious steps, the tension of two people who once shared a life now divided by tragedy. "Why, Daniel?" she asked softly, eyes glassy. "Why did you do it?" "I don't know," he whispered. "I thought I was escaping my life. Turns out, I was running straight into hell." Her voice broke. "You could have just come home." He looked up, tears welling for the first time in weeks. "There's no home left," he said. I burned it when I left. She nodded slowly, then turned away. It was their last conversation. The narrator returns as the screen fades to gray. Regret became Daniel's only companion, but even that wasn't pure. It wasn't sorrow for Ava's death. It was sorrow for his own ruin. Inside his cell, Daniel began to paint on scraps of cardboard. He painted the ocean, the villa, the balcony where Ava took her last breath. Each brushstroke was an apology he could never speak aloud. But remorse, like blood, has a way of staining everything it touches. One night, he wrote in his journal, words that would later be read aloud in court. I thought killing the lie would set me free. I didn't realize I was the lie. The narrator's voice lowers, final and cold. By the time the trial began, Daniel Cross was no longer fighting for freedom, only for meaning. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that only exists before judgment. Daniel Cross sat at the defense table in a Navy prison suit, thinner now, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. Across from him, the prosecution displayed a single photograph on the screen. The balcony of Villa 12, the place where love had turned to murder. The narrator's voice set the tone. After 6 months in custody, Daniel Cross finally faced the truth. Not the truth of what he'd done, but the truth of who he had become. The trial drew crowds. Locals came out of morbid curiosity. Reporters came for the headline. The courtroom air smelled faintly of sweat, paper, and tension. Every whisper, every cough echoed like thunder. The prosecution's opening statement was simple and devastating. This wasn't a crime of passion, said attorney Nisha Devereaux. It was control, a man who couldn't accept losing the illusion he built. And when that illusion cracked, he destroyed the person who exposed it. The camera in the documentary lingers on Daniel's expression, blank, yet trembling at the edges. The defense countered with a narrative of emotional manipulation, arguing that Ava's deception pushed Daniel into psychological collapse. He was lied to, exploited, humiliated, his lawyer said. He didn't go to Barbados to kill, he went to love. And love can break the strongest mind. But the evidence told its own story. Forensics, bloodstains, the failed cleanup, the voicemail, the photograph. When Detective Alana Greaves took the stand, her tone was firm. He didn't call for help, she said. He hid what he did. That's not remorse. That's guilt. Then came the most difficult testimony, the coroner's report. The words were clinical, detached, but the courtroom flinched at each one. Blunt force trauma, massive hemorrhage, non-accidental. The documentary cuts between the courtroom footage and interview clips of experts dissecting the psychology behind the act. Daniel's crime wasn't just physical. One criminologist explains. It was existential. He couldn't stand being fooled. In killing Ava, he was trying to kill the part of himself that had been deceived. The trial lasted 9 days. Daniel never testified. He sat in silence, hands clasped, eyes fixed on nothing. Each witness chipped away at whatever story he'd told himself. On the 10th day, both attorneys rested. The jury left the room to deliberate. For 4 hours, Daniel sat alone, staring at the floor. He thought about Ava's laughter, the way she'd called him Danny, the scent of her perfume when they first met. Every memory came wrapped in blood. The narrator's tone grows quieter. Regret is not redemption. It's the ghost that lingers when redemption is no longer possible. When the jury returned, the courtroom fell still. The foreman rose, voice shaking slightly. We find the defendant, Daniel Cross, guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. A gasp rippled through the room. Daniel didn't move. He just nodded slowly, as if the words confirmed something he'd already known. The judge spoke firmly. Mr. Cross, your choices ended a life and destroyed your own. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment. Daniel's eyes flickered. A small, almost grateful look, as though the sentence was the punishment he'd been waiting for. As guards led him away, he glanced once toward the gallery. In the back row sat a familiar face, Clara, his ex-wife. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just nodded, once, and turned away. The camera follows him down the hallway, chains clinking softly. "Do you regret it?" a reporter called out. He paused, looked up, and said just one line, "Every second." Then he disappeared through the door. The documentary's closing montage rolls, aerial shots of the turquoise sea, the empty villa, the waves hitting the balcony where it all began. The narrator's final voiceover echoes like an elegy. He left his wife to chase youth. He found a lie, then became one. And in the end, both lovers were buried. One in the ground, the other in guilt. A final pause. In love, the truth always surfaces, even if it takes blood to reveal it. The screen fades to black, and